Hello lovelies, welcome to today's video. So I'm doing a 12 by 12 layout and I thought I would try using the, what color is it? Carved Pumpkin Distress Oxide Spray, but instead of spraying it, because I find I like to have more control over my media, so I thought instead of spraying it I would use it like a watercolor and paint it onto my background. So I've tipped a little bit out into just like a little palette type thing, and then I've got a thin paintbrush and I've just started applying that to my background. Now I only wanted this in a small area because I know that I wanted to cover it up with I wanted to cover most of it up. Now you're probably asking, why would you put it there in the first place? Because I like it. but basically I only want it in a small area just to give me a bit of a pop of colour, and then I'm going to use all my layers to sort of, have it merge into the background. It makes sense in a minute, you'll see. But quickly, what I wanted to mention is, because I'm using the Distress Oxide Spray, I am using it as with the paintbrush, but because I'm using it and it's water reactive, what I did was I added a bit of water from my spray bottle in a very light spray just on the edges, just so it would wick out a little bit in a few areas, just to give me a bit of movement out of the ink, and just so it's not just completely straight up and down. So I didn't spray too much because that would have given me a big spray effect, but I just wanted a little bit of a wicking out type movement, and that's what I love about a water reactive ink. You can play with it so much, and there's so many, it'll always look different. Every time you try the same technique, it'll always turn out different because it reacts differently every time. The other thing I like about using a touch of water with these is you can see I've got different tones of the same color. So I didn't use any other color bar the carved pumpkin, but because I've added water in some areas and not in others, it's given me different shades of the same color, and that is a technique I love as well. So I also grabbed a black paint marker, dabbed it into my little palette, got a fan brush, and just added some splatters in a few places as well, just because I like the contrast that it gives. So now this is the part where I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. So I am going to start by trying to layer some mismatched layers, if that makes sense. Now normally I will map my photo on some white cardstock. I might put a few fairly square layers here and there. This time I wanted to really try something different. Now I thought the orange might be too orange, and I wasn't 100% sure about this layout when I started it. And I wanted to use the orange oxide spray because the blue I have used so many times in so many different layouts and projects already, but I really wanted to use the orange as well. And going through my photos, I thought this is going to be a challenge. And then I found this picture of that my husband took of me at soccer late last year, and it's this beautiful sunset, and I thought, well, this will work. But then I wanted to really get out of my comfort zone, and I wanted to try and use as many things from the kit that I could that would work. Now, trying to find something that coordinates with orange can be a challenge. But then I found that bringing in some of these pink tones also worked with my photo. And by trying to stagger my layers and not be so square and lined up and just perfect about my layers, it really was out of my comfort zone. But you know what? I love the way this turned out. I have tried many times to experiment with my layers and my bits and pieces of my ephemera, but I always tend to fall into the same pattern. I might map my photos once or twice. Everything's very even, very symmetrical, and I tend to have like a triangle of clusters. So this was really out of my comfort zone, but my goal was to cover up the majority of that orange just so I had little bits of it peeking out, because I really liked that look and I thought it really made that sunset pop by just having little bits of that orange poking out. So to achieve that goal, I had to try and really make my layers, really cover up a lot of this and be a big part of my focal point. And I tell you what, it was definitely out of my comfort zone, but it came together so well. What I did first is I went through all the bits and pieces from the kit, and I pulled out anything that might coordinate. As you saw, I pulled out all sorts of bits and pieces. There's some Project Life cards in there. There's some of the ephemera, and I pulled it all out, anything that I thought would work. And then I just started putting it down. I didn't think too much about it because when I think about things, that's when it goes wrong. And I just started laying it down. And it came together a lot more easily than I would have thought. Biggest advice I can give is if you're going to do something like this, have a stapler on hand. If I had have attempted to glue all of these layers back in this order, it never would have happened. So by just stapling right in the middle, it held them all together perfectly, but also because it's only held together with those staples and not layers of glue, there's a lot of movement in the background as well. So these papers aren't all stuck down. They're, the edges are raised and things. It just gives it a bit more dimension. Now, another thing I did was there was this, there was a quote on a background piece, but it was in green, so it didn't really match. But the quote was in black with a white background. So all I did was I cut that out because it worked really well with my layout, and it says happiness lives inside the smallest moments. So I fussy cut out the words from that green background piece, and I've used that and I've attached that to the layout by itself. And then, I've gone through and just looked for a few more bits and pieces. Now, this is something that I don't tend to do. I tend to stick with one little area for my cluster, or at most 2 or 3. But, it's hard to explain. Like, I'm a very symmetrical scrapper. Even if I am a messy mixed media scrapper, I still tend to have my clusters and mirror one side with the other, or very symmetrical. So having the odd shapes and the odd lines was something very different for me. Oh, this finger coming, this is my husband, because like I said, this was different for me, out of my comfort zone, and I get very insecure, and I'm like, come help me, what do you think, here or here? And he's like, oh, I like it here. And, well, I like it here. Yeah, it looks that good there too. So I asked for his advice. Is this too much? Is this not enough? This was one of those things where I had to say, okay, walk away from the layout, step away from the layout, because I could have kept going. The whole point was to do something different and push myself out of my comfort zone, and to keep layering embellishments and things was definitely not something I tend to do. So I got to the point where I'm like, maybe I should walk away now, maybe I should stop. But you know what, in the end, I ended up with a layout that I really love. It's definitely something different from what I tend to do, and I think that's what makes me love it so much. It doesn't look like a mirror copy of everything else that's in my album, and I had a lot of fun doing this, and the best part was I got to use up a lot of embellishments and bits and pieces that I might not have been able to use otherwise. So I think the moral of my video today is don't be afraid to try something new. I had a lot of fun with this layout, and I hope you've enjoyed watching it. Bye for now.